Oh yes, I need my clicker. Thank you very much. I think people are still coming back from break, but I will use this opportunity to quickly introduce myself. Zeinab Sulaiman, I am the global lead for medical transformation and innovation at Kite Pharma. I am a member of the medical affairs team, i.e. the elephant in the room. So I really look forward to sharing our story and journey towards developing the medical affairs KPI framework, what we learned along the way, the challenges that we faced, and hopefully what you all can learn from that experience to make it slightly easier for you as you go through it. So we've heard a lot today about the transformation journey and the need to innovate and what companies are going through to get there. At Kite, we went through a very similar journey, and I'm really excited about sharing how we have overcome those transformation and innovation challenges. We call it our evolution journey. I'll tell you more about why we're calling it evolution and what we've learned along the way. Before I get there, Kite, a few short statements about Kite. Some of you may know Kite. They're a global cell therapy company. They're the current global leaders in cell therapy, and they've treated more patients with CAR T cell therapy than any other company. Legal made me put this slide in, so I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so why did we even start thinking about KPIs at Kite? Why do we do this? What was the need for it? As we know, many companies already have functional KPIs, or they have field-specific KPIs, or KPIs that maybe specifically looks at activities that functions within medical affairs do. What did we need to do that was different to other companies or different medical affairs teams, and how did we get there? One of the most important drivers, about me. These slides confuse me. A little bit about me. So as I mentioned, Zeinab Sulaiman, I have been with Kite for just over a year. Prior to that, I've been with medical affairs operations at a global capacity for the past 7 years. And before that, I was a lead pharmacist in the NHS. I'm based in the UK, but I'm part of the global team, so I work quite closely with our US-based organization. I really enjoy and have a passion for data and utilization of data for decision-making. It's always been something that I've always been interested in before at NHS and ever since joining medical affairs. And it's really exciting because as part of my role in medical affairs, I'm able to really think with leaders who have similar ambitions and visions and create ideas around how we can better utilize data and analytics to help enhance the way we operate as an organization. I'm also known for disrupting the norm and challenging the status quo. It's sometimes a good thing at work, not always welcomed at home. I'm working on that. And on a personal note about me, I'm a keen advocate of the role of mothers, young mothers and women in a corporate world. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail because I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about that, but I'm hoping Dario is going to give us a session next year to talk about what corporate organizations are doing to support the role of young mothers at work. Okay, so as I was saying prematurely, next slide, why did we think we need this? Why did we even start working on developing our KPI framework for medical affairs? What brought this need on? We heard a lot this morning and earlier this afternoon about this transformation journey that many companies are going through, especially medical affairs organization, right? The role of medical affairs is changing. We're no longer being seen as that support function that previously was responsible for HCP engagements or just conference presence and participation. The role of medical affairs is continuously enhancing, and we're becoming more of that advanced strategic ecosystem, a strategic partner. And for us to really be recognized and to remain being seen as that strategic ecosystem partner, we need to be able to demonstrate the impact that we have within our companies, but also outside of the companies. So to be able to do that and to be able to really demonstrate how we are evolving and how we're becoming that ecosystem partner, we recognized that being able to measure the impact of everything we do, the impact of our activities, is a really important first step. It's a really important thing for us to be able to deliver. And we started thinking about, all right, how do we measure where we are today so that we can clearly demonstrate how we're evolving and how we are really being that ecosystem partner. And we developed our ambitions of what we want to do. We developed a set of goals of how we want to get there. And we said we really want to remain the category leaders for cell therapy, and we want to make sure that we are being seen as competitive and as category leaders in this area. So therefore, we have to have a really strong vision, and we have to be able to measure our impact of medical affairs through that vision. We then said, right, we need to redefine the impact and value that medical affairs has by establishing a really clear overarching ambition and framework to measure those KPIs. And we also want to be able to highlight very clearly how medical affairs can both internally and externally add value to the ecosystem and to our broader stakeholders. To do that, the first starting point for us was the vision. So we had a vision. We asked our leaders. We assumed that everyone's already on board with this vision. So we asked our leaders and the broader team how they felt about this vision. Did it resonate with them? Was this something that they could get behind relatively easily? And to our surprise, the answer was actually no. They didn't even know that we had a vision statement in some cases, or if they did, they weren't behind it. They didn't feel like it resonated very well in terms of what they thought we were trying to achieve. So that was a challenge and that was a surprise. But it was an easy one to fix because we very quickly started really thinking about, right, how do we together collectively develop a vision and a vision statement that everyone can get behind? Because that's the first step, right? If you want to evolve as a medical affairs organization, if you want to become those ecosystem partners, we have to have a really clear vision that everyone can get behind. We have to have a vision that captures everything we do and that we can use to measure the impact that we have. So we started from there. And I wasn't able to actually share our actual vision and impact areas with you guys. So some examples, which is not very different to, I'm sure, most other medical affairs organizations. So we started by redefining our vision statement and also our mission statements to support that. And once we defined the vision statement in a really clear way and everyone was on board with it, we said, right, how do we now measure and understand what we do against this vision? How do we know if we're being successful? How do we know if all the work that we do is actually contributing to fulfilling this vision? We broke the vision down into 6 core impact areas that medical affairs are responsible for delivering. And like I mentioned, this is not rocket science. This is not any different to perhaps any other medical affairs organization across the industry. But it was really important for us to make sure we really clearly defined 6 areas that everyone felt like captured all the work that we do across medical affairs. So once we developed these, we kind of road tested them. We went through this with every single sub-function within medical affairs, and we said, right, what do you guys do? What are all the different activities and responsibilities that each of your team has? And does it fit into at least one of these core impact areas? And like I said before, they're not out of this world, so they more or less capture everything we do across medical affairs. And that was the first starting point in really helping us understand what is it that we're trying to do, what is it that we're trying to solve for, and what are those key focus areas. From there, we broke it down even further, and we said, if these are the core impact areas that we know we want to be able to deliver, what are the core impact outcomes? What are the most important deliverables and activities that we do within each of our sub-functions, real-world evidence, scientific communication, field engagement, all the different sub-functions within medical affairs? What are the most important deliverables that they do? And how does it fit within this model? And also, what are the outcomes that they're trying to achieve? Because if we can define the core impact deliverables and the core impact outcomes, then it's quite easy to define the core impact KPIs that you want to deliver. And we did this exercise a number of times. We did it once with a global leadership team. We then repeated it for each of the regions and involved the regional leadership team to make sure that we take into account the nuances and the differences for each region. Otherwise, it would have been something that came from global and no one else was on board with, and we were worried about that. So by doing this a few times and by really taking into account the regional perspective, it gave the regional teams an opportunity to share their concerns, their feedback, their differences and nuances at the regional level with us, and how things may be different at the regional medical affairs level from what the global team are expecting or planning in their head. And that was a really good exercise because it also gave us an opportunity to define the core impact activities that we wanted to see more of. Because there are some activities that medical affairs are expected to deliver and are really the high impact activities that really signifies the role of medical affairs. And those activities weren't being done enough. And there were other activities that medical affairs team were spending quite a lot of time and effort and resources delivering that just weren't really as important anymore. And perhaps they had to be downscaled. So this exercise and this activity really allowed us to better streamline what is it that we should be doing and what are the target behaviors and activities that we want to drive towards and what are the things that we should be doing less of and how do we reduce those and how do we make sure we rationalize our activities in the right way. From there, we kind of ended up with a really long laundry list of lots and lots of KPIs that were collected from the conversations with the regions and the global team and all the different sub-functions. And what we then had to do was to really then think about, okay, how do we rationalize this? What are the top, really most important KPIs that we want to be able to include in our dashboard that drives the right behaviors, helps us measure the most important activities and the most important impacts, and what are the ones that perhaps aren't as important at this moment in time. And through that activity and exercise, we ended up with a list of 14 KPIs that covered all the 6 core impact areas that we wanted to be able to measure against, because that's how we were going to be able to measure against our vision. So lots and lots of workshops, lots and lots of discussions and consultation and input from legal and business conduct and our cross-functional team, and we ended up with a list of 14 KPIs. Conceptually, everyone was happy because they felt like, obviously it's really important to be able to measure the impact of our data generation activities or how well medical affairs are forming partnerships and, the interactions we have with the HCPs, etc. Conceptually, at this point, everyone's really happy. The hardest part of this journey was when we started translating those KPIs into actual dashboards, when we started to pull in internal and external data sources, and we started showing people how we're actually going to measure it. That's when people, especially within medical affairs, because medical affairs, as we discussed this morning, they're not as used to having KPIs. They're not, our colleagues in commercial, development, market access, they're quite used to having KPIs that looks at market share, that looks at revenue data, etc. So they're comfortable with the idea of a data point or a KPI being used as a measure of their performance. Medical conceptually agrees that we need KPIs to be able to measure our impact. Well, at least within Kite and within our team, when it actually came down to implementing it, there were challenges. People had their own kind of understanding of how the KPIs were going to be used. They had their own way of thinking in terms of the consequences of the KPIs not showing the right numbers. And there were kind of more internal education and awareness and change management topics, but they came up really loud and clear. And it became really obvious to us that by actually now showing people visualizations and dashboards that uses data from, I'll tell you guys more about how we kind of visualized it, but it was a combination of different data sources that had never been presented to them in the same way, in the same place, in that specific way. So that definitely made our internal target audience a little bit nervous, and we had to really think about breaking that down for them and working together to educate them around how we were going to use them and why we were going to use them. And the most important thing for us, I'll come back to this, the most important thing for us at that point was really trying to embed the idea of data-driven decision-making. It wasn't about, we want to measure your performance, or we want to use this information to downsize the field team, or we want to use this information because this particular sub-function is no longer relevant. It was really about enabling the leadership team to have a set of data points, a dashboard, to help them with their decision-making process, for them to be able to look at the data from these impact measurements and say, right, this is how we've always done, I'm just going to use an example, medical education strategy or medical content strategy. And so we've always assumed that it's working well or it's working fine. Now we're going to look at data on the impact that our medical education is having on improving HCP's awareness and ultimately improving patient standard of care. And what we're actually seeing is that perhaps this particular content is not as useful as we thought it was, or perhaps this particular set of publications just aren't having the impact that we thought they have. And really getting them into the mindset of using data and using dashboards and using information as part of the day-to-day decision-making. This is still something we're going through. The change management component of that piece is still not something that, I can say we've done and here's the learnings from it. But just the change in mindset is something that's coming to us slowly, right? We are getting people to really practice having formal business reviews using data in the same way that perhaps our colleagues in commercial and other functions have done for many, many years. It's just not something that medical are used to doing, so it requires a little bit more of a change. I've had to remove most of my dashboards and examples because our legal saw my slides and they just lost it. But I've put one example from the dashboard in there just to kind of show you guys an idea of how we've gone about it. So obviously, conceptually, everyone in medical affairs agreed that we want to be able to know how well medical affairs are establishing relationships with our HCP partners and how well we're maintaining it, right? So conceptually, everyone agrees that's something we care about and we want to be able to measure, we want to be able to understand, but they never really kind of expected to be able to have a baseline, right? Where are we today? How well do we establish and maintain relationships at this moment in time? And what are the tactics and the strategic decisions that we are making? Perhaps we're changing our field strategy. Perhaps we're changing the customer engagement strategy. And what are the consequences of those changes on very tangible deliverables and impact measures like HCP partnership score? And this is what we're trying to now embed within the organization, right? We're saying, right, this is something you have data points on. You know how well your team established relationships with the HCPs. We were measuring reverse attrition and churn, and we know that that's the data from last year. Now, since last year, you've embedded all of these different measures, you've implemented these tactics. What's been the consequence of that? What's been the impact of those activities that you've done, and how can we measure it? It's really difficult for medical affairs. Right? We know that medical affairs has historically always struggled with measuring KPIs and impacts because there's not a lot of data out there that we can use. And what we're trying to do is use data points that we have available. There's a lot of data that all of our organizations have available to us, but we just don't utilize them. CRM is just one example. There's lots of other data. And what we're trying to do is just kind of get everyone into the mindset of referring to those data points and being able to utilize them as part of their decision making, to say, right, we've done all these tactics, I have all this data, I can see that maybe this is not a one-to-one relationship between what tactic I did and how it changed HCP partnership, but it's a factor that has a correlation with this particular impact. So by measuring it, I can see what other factors are contributing to it and what else I can do as a medical affairs field team or a medical affairs leadership team to change that. And that's kind of that's the behavior that we're trying to embed and what we're trying to drive towards. So why KPIs now? Why is it really important for us to do KPIs right now at this moment in time? And again, as I mentioned, what are those internal change management and kind of behavioral change components that we really, really importantly need to be able to deliver? As I mentioned, really important, especially for us, because we've started our medical affairs evolution journey and we're moving towards becoming that more evolved medical affairs strategic partner. And it's really important for us to be able to utilize data, to become more data-driven as an organization, and really evaluate the strategic impact of our activities and the tactical delivery of the work that we do. This is not a choice, it's something that's happening. We have to become more data-driven. We have to get used to utilizing data as part of our day-to-day decision-making. And we have, like I mentioned, we have so much data, right? I know that, for example, for sure at Kite Medical Affairs, we have access to so much data that it was completely untouched. Like, no one was using it. We've heard this a few times today from other speakers, that there is so much data, and we just need to be able to utilize that better. And this is just in the absence of AI or any other really enhanced technology. As it is already, there's so much data that medical can utilize and medical can really benefit from. We've just never really done it. So we have to now get into the mindset of utilizing this data, measuring the medical affairs dashboards, and really kind of working towards becoming a lot more data-driven as we shape our KPIs and as we shape our medical affairs strategy. The data will continue to improve as our colleagues across medical affairs interact with the dashboard, as they utilize it for the decision making, as they give us feedback on how they're interacting with this dashboard. The data sources will improve, the way the dashboard is designed and being presented to them will improve. This is going to be very much an iterative process, but we need to have a starting point, right? There's no point waiting for the perfect solution before we roll this out. We rolled it out as it is. We have 7 out of the 14 KPIs that are currently being visualized. And as we work on it and as we evolve the dashboard, we identify new data sources and we get feedback from the team that will help us continue to grow the dashboard. And lastly, data is not just numbers. You know, we can't just look at data and say, right, this number is what it is, and that's it. It's just a standalone number. It's not. It will really help us tell our collective value story. And what we've done is we've really applied an element of data sciences to the way we've designed these KPIs. We've combined internal data that tells us about our day-to-day activities, you know, field activities from CRM, or functional activity data that were previously just used as they were just activity-based data. But we're combining those activity-level data with external impact data to really be able to tell the story of this is what we did, and these are the activity metrics behind it, and this is the impact that those activities had externally. By combining the data, we can actually see the full story. We can see what we did and what did it lead to, what was the impact that it had. And that's really helping people understand, right, this is why we're becoming more data-driven. This is how we're evaluating the effectiveness of our strategy and the tactics that we deliver, because we're combining and overlapping these 2 data sources together. And that's been really, really powerful. And yeah, so it's not just data as the standalone numbers, it's the collective value story that will really help us articulate the amazing work that medical affairs teams across the industry, across pharma do, and the great contribution that they have to patients ultimately receiving the best possible treatment. That has always been really hard for us to measure and convey, right? It's always been really, really difficult for medical affairs to stand up and say, here's my dashboard, here's all the activities that I've done, and here's the impact of my activities. We've just never been able to do that well. And I'm not saying we have the perfect solution at Kite, but we're trying to get one step closer to being able to say, this is how we did it, this was the impact of our activities, and as a result of it, this many more patients got access to treatment, and that's why medical affairs are great. And just to kind of summarize everything I mentioned, medical affairs, as well as other parts of the industry, are already on this transformation journey. Like I mentioned, we are at Kite going through an evolution journey. We're trying to modernize and evolve the way we operate, the way we interact with our ecosystem. And for us to be able to really get there, we need to have more strategic focus, and we really need to be more data-driven in our approach to interacting with our HCPs, in changing their perception and raising their awareness. So that data-driven approach is really, really important if you want to continue to evolve. So impact measurement KPI is one way for us to really understand the baseline and continue to evaluate our strategic relevance and tactical delivery. And I really hope that next year this time we can come together again and I can share the rest of this journey with you guys and show you how it actually got implemented and embedded, because we were quite early in this journey, and how it changed the way we strategize and we deliver our tactics. With that, I will go to Q&A, see if there are any questions that I can answer. Unless it was really clear. Gary? You promised no hard questions, Gary. We discussed this before.
I did. No, thank you very much for the presentation. I was just curious, with being a specialized CAR-T therapy company, do you think it's an advantage or a disadvantage to do this and measure the impact with being in such a niche and specialized therapy area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this is my personal perspective, right? Given that it's such a niche area, and because it's such a niche area, the role of medical affairs at Kite is even more significant, right? We are needed to make the ecosystem work, right? We have to be part of those partnerships with the HCPs and with the patients and with the treatment centers. Without medical affairs, the ecosystem that we are trying to develop, that Kite is trying to build to interact with our patients, it will fail. So given that we have such a significant role to play, we have to be able to measure our impact. We have to be able to say, right, this is what good looks like, and this is how we're delivering against that. So I think for us, it's an advantage, and I'm hoping that we can utilize that advantage point. And again, because we're a cell therapy company, and because we have so much data in terms of how our manufacturing is done and that process, we want to be able to use that data to really help measure the impact that medical affairs has. So maybe we're at a slightly advantaged situation because of how data rich we are as a company. Thank you. Yes. Mike, here down the front, please.
Thank you for the sharing. My question is that since the new vision and maybe strategy, can you share with us your next step? Maybe the new organization recharge or new team setup?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a really good question. Thank you for that. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we redefined our vision, and we redefined the way we want to go about implementing against that vision. And as soon as you talk about redefining vision and redefining how we want to go about that, everyone assumes it's going to be a restructure and they're going to lose their job. So that was like the first question that we got. So everybody started freaking out, thinking, oh my God, there's going to be no job for me and I'm going to lose my job. But actually, what we really wanted to do, we heard from the panel earlier that it's about taking small steps in the right direction and not necessarily just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and starting fresh. So we shared the new vision. We've been trying really hard as an organization and as a leadership team to embed that evolution narrative across our organization, right? We're saying we're evolving. This is why we're evolving. This is the vision that we're trying to achieve. How can we all work together to get there? And the reason why we're calling it evolution and not transformation is exactly for that reason, because we feel like Kite Medical Affairs team have already done a really amazing job making sure cell therapy gets to as many patients as possible. So transformation sometimes kind of alludes to what we did before wasn't good, so let's just throw all that out and start fresh. But it's not that. We're just trying to evolve. We're trying to do everything we did, but get a little bit better every day. So that's the approach we've taken. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Is there a question? Oh, I thought I saw someone's head up. They were just scratching their head. Okay, if there are no other questions, again, thank you so much for your time. And if you have any other questions for me, you can probably find me in the break area afterwards. Thank you.